right, guys, welcome back to the Dan and Dave Show. My name is Daniel Irwin. I am your host with the most. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Arvis Owens. Welcome back,
Hi,
Mr.
Daniel. Thanks for having me. Hi, Dave. Thank you guys so much for having me on board.
It's really a pleasure. Very much a pleasure. Arvis, would you mind giving us a little introduction of who you are and where we are in our career right now?
Okay. All right. Let me start off with this. I'm gonna start off with who I am, what I do, and then why your audience should care.
Yeah.
My name is Arvis Owens. I'm originally from Beaumont, Texas. I live in Springfield, Virginia now, which is near DC. And what I do is I'm an advocate for military members who were falsely accused and wrongly convicted of sexual assault, domestic violence, sexual harassment. And then now I'm going to tell you why you should care. Because if you can't trust the military to be fair to your sons, then how can they keep you safe? Right? And so people go, well, Arvis, how is that? Well, if the best and the brightest find out that no matter what the truth is, no matter what the evidence showed, they won't be treated fairly, are they going to join? Is one. Number two, if the best and brightest are already in and they find out they won't be treated fairly, are they going to stay? And then my last question to your audience is, if the best and the brightest don't join and they don't stay, who is left to defend you? Now, a little bit about me. 1995 Naval Academy graduate. I was a naval officer. Did my years of service. And then at one point I was falsely accused in 2013 and wrongly convicted. My jury found me not guilty of 6 of the 7 sexual assault charges. The 7th they found me guilty of. And then when my accuser lied again during sentencing, they asked to revoke that verdict. Wow. And the judge wouldn't allow it. Wow. I was sentenced to 0 jail time. And in several years later, the state of Virginia, after I started advocating for others like myself, they took me off the sex offender registry, but I was on there for about 8 years almost. Wow. So that's my background, and that's what I do, and that's why people should care.
Wow. That is a lot for a person to take in. A lot of, especially where the Army is right now. Right now, EO and Sharp are very lenient towards the accuser, in that the accuser is, I think they say something like 98% accurate or not wrong. How does that not necessarily work with what you've experienced personally?
So I'm glad you said that, Daniel. That's a great segue. So when they give you that 2%, ask them how they determined it. I will tell you, in the readings that I've had, they say that only 2% of accusers make false accusations. But what I've read is that, how do they calculate that 2%? It was only the people, the accusers, who said, hey, I lied. So even if the evidence showed that they were lying, they didn't count that. So as an example, when I was going through it, they would teach at training it was only 2% false accusations. Then they changed it to 2 to 5%. Then they changed it 2 to 8% false accusers. And now it's 2 to 10. Wow. So what happened? They anchored that 2% in your mind. And then I'm going to give you a counterexample. So there is a group, and this group consists of active federal judges, state judges, defense counsel, victims advocate. So it's a diverse group of professionals, I should say, looking at the military's DV and sex assault situation. And during one of their inspections, their 4th annual report, it's called the DAC iPad, the Defense Advisory Committee for the Investigations, Prosecutions, and Defense of Sex Assaults. I'll tell you how they started, but I'll tell you first what they found. They looked at a snapshot, and they found that 40% of military cases were going forward to court-martial, that's trial, with no probable cause. So I want to counter that to the civilian side. Do you know how many cases go forward to trial in civilian with no probable cause?
I have no idea.
0. They don't. with no, I want them to look up what probable cause means. And it means that there is either no evidence or there's not sufficient evidence to obtain a conviction. And then if you look at their 4th annual report, the DAC iPad, they said in the military it was 40%. So let's look at 40%, and let's say half of those got found not guilty and half didn't. Well, then that's 20%. And how does that work with your 2%? Let me add this last point to it. The military incentivizes, they pay accusers. They get paid money. Their crimes are forgiven if they're active duty. So let's say they've done something wrong, their crimes are forgiven. They get VA benefits upwards 70 to 100% for life, and they get job placement.
Wow.
And then I'd like to tell your audience some of the stories, and then they can make the decision. So I'll start with the Army because your background is Army. So we have a young man. He's an officer. To let you know, officers get falsely accused and wrongly convicted too. He was married. He's married to another officer. So she has an extramarital affair with an enlisted man, which we know is against the rules. And he finds out, and he's going to divorce her, and she's going to be punished. And then guess what happens?
What?
She accuses him of sexual assault.
Whoa.
And then now what she's done is forgiven, wiped off the board, and they come after her. They also accuse him of assault. Now, but what they don't take into account is she had a gun to his head. She violated the restraining order, which was drunk, had a gun to his head, and he hit her to get her to drop the gun. He was sentenced to, I believe, 17 to 20 years in prison. The court came back later and said, you know what? We made a mistake. You're right. She did have that gun to your head, and she shouldn't have. We'll take a whole 30 days off. The sex assault never substantiated. There was no proof, and they didn't take into effect that she was going to be punished before she filed that.
Wow.
That's Army.
Wow.
You ready to go to Navy, or you want me to stick with Army?
Nah, yeah, we want to hear what's up with Navy. Yeah.
I want your audience to Google Keith Barry, Keithbarry, I believe. He was a Navy SEAL. So he was falsely accused. He was out in Coronado, California, not far from where you are. And his admiral was a 2-star admiral. And when you Google his name, you'll see what the admiral said. I'll summarize briefly. The admiral said he was worried about what the then president would do and Senator Kristen Gillibrand, regardless of what the evidence showed. And so he found him guilty. And then years later, after he retired, he wrote an affidavit. We have a copy of that affidavit. I can share it with you if you want, where he said, yeah, I should have done something, but he was scared.
Wow.
So I ask your audience who believe that 2%, how many other generals and admirals were scared too, but they never said anything?
Wow.
So that's Navy. His case was eventually overturned, but this Navy SEAL, this hero to our country, was homeless. He couldn't get a job driving for Uber. That's his favorite quote. He was surf couching.
Wow.
What do you call it? Couch surfing. I'm sorry. He was living on people's sofas because he couldn't get a job.
Wow.
Because he had all of these certifications and these qualifications and all these years of honorable service. But because he was falsely accused, he was sentenced to prison. And not only was he sentenced to prison, they denied him his medication, put him in solitary confinement because he wouldn't sign a statement saying he was guilty. And let me tell your audience what life is like being on the sex offender registry. It's nobody wants you to be employed with them. Nobody wants to be near you. They don't want to invite your kids out. I will tell you, they will hire someone convicted of murder, but they won't hire someone who's a sex offender.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Your neighbors will treat you poorly. Yeah. So imagine having that. You're on the sex offender registry and you have a dishonorable discharge. Whew. Whew. And it gets even worse than that, Daniel. It gets even worse than that. Here's how it gets worse. In the military, do you know what being titled means?
Mm-mm.
Here's what it means. It means if the military investigates you for sexual assault, and let's say they said, hey, there's not enough evidence to convict you, we're going to send you to a non-judicial punishment, Article 15. You still have a record, and it's in an FBI database. So you can't purchase a gun. You can't work for law enforcement. You can't be a teacher. You can't work around kids. If you have a fiance from a foreign country, guess what? You can't sponsor her for U.S. citizenship. Example, this is another Army case. This guy's a New Yorker. He's from Harlem. He was falsely accused. He went to court-martial, and the system worked. He got found not guilty. But then guess what happened? He gets out. He goes to college. He completes his 4-year degree. He applies for 68 jobs. Do you know how many interviews he got?
How many?
0. His father and he do some research. They found out because he was titled. So even though he went to court-martial and got found not guilty of all charges, the military still titled him. Wow. And they do so if you go to NJP as well. And most people don't know it. Wow. Let me know when you're ready for Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Because it was all of the service. So let's go Air Force.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you about one Air Force case where this guy was an OSI agent. So these are the investigators in the Air Force. So he goes on, what was it? It was Craigslist Casual Encounters. He meets a young lady who also happens to be in the Air Force. They have a relationship. And then guess what happens? He breaks up with her. She comes over to his house and she's trying to sleep with him so he can take her back. And he says, no. But she's upset and she's crying. She says, can I at least stay? And we cuddle. So he does. He lets her lay on his chest and he goes to sleep with her. She wakes up. She goes to civilian hospital and says, hey, he raped me.
Wow.
He bit me. He choked me. And they said, okay, we're going to arrest him immediately. She goes, no, I don't want that. So she goes to the base and she reports it. They investigate. They bring a special camera from Quantico, Virginia, because she says he bit her, choked her. She's got bruising. Guess how many bruises they find, Daniel?
How many?
0. They take this special skin camera, and they know it was working because it can show the layers of her tattoo, but it finds no bruising. It's called a SAME nurse who does the sexual assault investigation, examination. They find she hasn't even had sex, much less been raped. There's no trauma. There's no, she's like, you haven't had sex. She brings in a second expert to look who verifies. He gets found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Whoa.
And it turned out she had a fraudulent enlistment. She had a felony conviction before she joined. So the defense asked for that. When do you think they got it?
Never.
No, the day before his convening authorities action. Wow. So it's post-trial. He's already been found guilty.
Yeah. And
the day before he's supposed to submit his clemency package to the convening authority, the general, they go, oh, here. Guess what? And he can't use it because it wasn't used in court. And they had it the whole time. That's an Air Force case. Another Air Force case really quickly.
Wow.
A man finds out that his wife is cheating. And she gets pregnant by the other man. She's a teacher. He's a teacher. This guy's Air Force. He's a major. So he finds out and he files for divorce. He gets custody of their daughter. Do you know how hard it is for a man to get custody of the kids in this country?
It's incredibly hard. The woman has to literally be either on drugs or in jail.
and this is in this country, and it's a daughter. Wow. So he gets custody, and then when he gets custody of their daughter, she files sexual assault charges.
Wow.
She doesn't go to one police precinct, this civilian. She goes to 2. Guess what? They both say no. They investigate, so there's no evidence of this. And then she goes to the military. What do you think they did?
Oh, yeah.
The military starts the charges thing, and then her attorneys go to his attorneys and says, if you give up custody of the daughter, we'll drop all charges. He says, no, I didn't do anything. I believe in the system. He goes to court. He gets sentenced to prison, gets found guilty.
30 years?
It gets better. I think 5.
Okay.
So it gets better. Here's what happens. His mom calls the guy she was having the affair with, civilian. He admits that he received $10,000 and he lied in the military court. Because people don't realize the military court has no jurisdiction over civilians. So if they lie, you can't process them for perjury. they would have to go to the Justice Department or someone external. But how often does that happen? Rarely, ever. So she gets this guy on recording, and we have a copy of the recording. They submit it to the Air Force. They order another hearing. The judge says, well, we have to hear from the guy. They bring him on the stand, and he didn't just get $10,000. That was one installment. He admits he got $100,000 and he lied. 100K. So the judge goes, well, I can't overturn the findings. So the young man goes to his congressperson who does an inquiry, and it turns out the Air Force says, well, he could have overturned it, but he used his judgment not to overturn it.
Wow.
And then they start, well, he submitted it too late. Here's the question I have for your audience. Why would you have a hearing to hear evidence if it was submitted too late to begin with? Mm-hmm. Those are a couple of Air Force cases. I want to go back to one Army case just because you probably have a large Army audience, just for GP. We have a gentleman, he was in Kentucky, so Army base in Kentucky. He goes out, night of revelry with the troops, takes a young lady back, has sex with her. She claims, hey, he raped me. She goes to civilian authorities. They come to his house. Daniel, he didn't even ask for an attorney. He says, I didn't do this. He waives his rights. He goes in. He gives an interview. He participates 100%. The civilian police in Kentucky bring his accuser in. She admits she lied. She had a physical problem. She was in danger of being kicked out of the military. But guess what? Now that she's a victim, she can't get kicked out now. They drop all charges against him. 1 year later, the Army brings those same charges back up with two conditions. He's not allowed to use the video evidence that the civilian Kentucky police used to drop the charges. And there was a CID agent in the room when she confessed. That CID agent is not allowed to testify. These are the types of cases.
Wow.
Let me go to Marine Corps. We have a gentleman out California. The DNA evidence, Daniel, shows he didn't do it. 5 years in prison. Now, his case was eventually overturned, but you mean to tell me the Marine Corps had the DNA proof that it wasn't him? They still took him to court-martial. They still found him guilty. They still sent him to prison. And then it took 5 years for them to overturn it. And then they still mistreated him. They didn't want him coming on the base. They didn't want him dealing with troops or Marines. And then they docked his pay for some crazy reason that he's still fighting now. And so we have cases where there was DNA proof, they still were found guilty. So I ask your audience who watch NCIS and CSI and go, wait a minute, you mean to tell me the DNA showed he was innocent and he still got found guilty? Yes.
Wow.
Coast Guard. We have a gentleman, great guy. He's in the Coast Guard, and his wife and him aren't getting along, so he files for divorce. She's telling him, you don't want to do that, right? I can't prove to you that's a threat. If somebody tells you you don't want to do something, Daniel, how do you take that?
As if they don't want to do it.
Right. You don't want to do that. He files for divorce, and then she files sexual assault charges.
Oof, got him.
She testifies in court. Well, he asked for sex, and I said yes, but I didn't really mean yes. And I went along with it, and I did it, but in my mind, I didn't want to do it. She got custody of the kids. He hasn't seen his children.
Wow.
I mean, she said that, and he still got found guilty. Wait a minute. Yeah, I had sex with him. Yeah, he would think that was consensual because I said yes and I participated, but in my mind, I was thinking no.
So question, with all these cases, what do you think the problem is? Is it just the stereotype of the amount of rapes that the Army generates, or is it bureaucracy? What's the issue here?
I'll tell you what the issue is. So this has existed for a while, but it really got hot and heavy 2009, 2010 is when it started. There was a survey. You know how the military has you fill out these surveys? And then what they do is they take a snapshot of the people who did the surveys, and then they extrapolate. If 10% of the people in the survey said this, then they assume it applies for everybody in the military. So they ask, hey, have you been touched, or, sexual harassment language? And so based on that survey, they go, oh my God, if we project this percentage to the entire military, then that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then the next step, they looked and said, well, how many prosecutions for sexual assault? How many cases go forward and how many prosecute? Well, this number is low compared to this number we see in the survey. There must be a problem. Her name is Senator Kristen Gillibrand, senator from New York. She started putting pressure on the military.
Oh, wow.
And then media. And then that was the time of the Me Too movement. I don't know if you remember that as well. So you have the conditions. You've got the Me Too movement. You've got this survey. And then it's all in the media. And they started pressing the military. We want results, and results are convictions. We have a letter from, he was the vice chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, Vice Admiral Winnefeld Jr., where he wrote a letter to the senators, to several senators, at least one I know of, where he says, we're getting convictions in cases that civilian law enforcement won't pursue. And here's my question. How are they getting convictions in cases that civilian law enforcement won't pursue? And when you consider 40% of cases going forward without probable cause, when you consider denying people the right to use evidence and things like that, that's how they do it. Judges, prosecutors, investigators, it's a huge problem, and it came from pressure, paramount from Senator Kristen Gillibrand.
Oh, wow.
So
go ahead.
I was going to give you this example. Just for some of the people who are on the fence, the military had a one-drink policy.
Yep.
So imagine this for a second. You go out for your anniversary, and you and your wife have one drink, but she can't consent and you can. And now you're a sexual predator. So we have people who were convicted because the person who accused them had one alcoholic beverage. Now back up for a second. They can drive legally. They're not intoxicated. You have one drink for your birthday, one drink for an anniversary, one drink when you. So one person can consent and one person can't. People don't see that as a problem.
Yep.
So that's part of it, is the education you're giving these people. In fact, the DAC iPad had a recent quote where they did site surveys at several bases, and the troops were saying, finally, hey, there's a problem with false allegations and wrongful convictions. They've said it. They're bold enough to say it because they were scared. Guess what? That group tried to say, well, it's training. You know, they're trained that if you have one drink, you can't consent. But why would the military do that? What kind of pressure could be placed on them where they would do it, and what else are they doing? And that's what people don't understand.
Wow.
They do not understand. And what I want to thank you and your partner for doing is having me on, because a lot of people who report on the military, they fall into two camps. They either don't know what's happening with this issue in the military, or they do know, and they refuse to speak on it.
Yep.
That's it. Yep. That's all you have.
Yeah, there's definitely there is a very cautious approach when taking on topics that go not according to the grain, as it were. Especially now with the huge push with Sharp and EEO. I thought this story was incredible, specifically because we just recently had a Sharp meeting right when I met you, and the thing that they said was like, at any point of the sexual engagement, a woman can deny, sex or whatever. And, we all, get that. But the, I always thought was interesting was the one alcohol drink. So you can have one beer, she doesn't have one beer, and you're still in the wrong. Or she has one beer, you don't have one beer, and you're still in the wrong. You know what I'm saying? So, like, it's, essentially, yeah. I was like, yes. That doesn't sound right.
I'm going to give you an example of that one. And this person had more than one drink.
Yeah.
So it's a guy and a girl. This is the
Mm-hmm.
Marine Corps. They had drinks. So she leaves and comes back. So he's passed out drunk in his bunk. But, she came with her girlfriend, and her girlfriend's with another Marine friend of his.
Mm-hmm.
So that friend lets her into his room. So
Mm-hmm.
he's sleeping, passed out drunk. And she initiates oral sex on him. So he wakes up.
Got
right?
a lady on him.
And yeah, look, okay. And then they do other things.
Yeah.
So he goes to court martial. Like, they wake up, everything's cool. And then he finds out a few days, oh, you've been accused of rape. He gets found not guilty of the oral sex that started while he was sleeping, but the vaginal and anal he gets found guilty of when he wakes up. And you're like, wait a minute, y'all both was drinking. You started it.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't consent when he was sleeping and passed out drunk. But he got sentenced to prison, right? And so that's the type of pressure that was on them.
Wow.
And if I can plug a website where people can go to find out more stuff.
Yeah. So
we have a change.org, it's www.change.org/unjust, UNJUST, You can read other stories. You'll see updates of those stories. We also have a site called wouldyu.care where you can see stories and you can see some of the evidence. We're happy to share it with you. You can contact me directly. And I will tell you, most of the people I've consulted with before they went to court martial, all of them actually have either been found not guilty or the charges were dropped. I still get calls and messages from people who are still getting falsely accused.
We're going to have all your information scroll at the bottom, so they'll have everyone will have access to you, because this is eye-opening and jaw-dropping. So this is very, very important, especially for our military service members who are falsely accused, because we are told that 98% of the accusations are 100% founded with a 2% inaccuracy rate.
Ask them how they got it.
Yeah.
Ask them how they got it.
Yeah.
And Daniel, the hard part is you're a military member. You don't feel comfortable asking in that setting in the training.
Mm-hmm.
But notice it's how they got that number. And I would tell you they had the same training when I was in. When I went through it, it was 2%. And then they made it 2 to 5, and then 2 to 8. Now it's 2 to 10. Well, guess what? But they still hold on to that 2.
Wow.
Without saying how they got it and how they know. So I'm telling you about people who were convicted, and I'm telling you what the evidence was. Like, there was DNA proof that showed they didn't do it. Do you count them in your number? Because they were convicted, right? So how do you get that information and capture it?
Wow.
Let me make another point. So do you know what a conviction integrity unit or an innocence project is?
No.
Okay, I'll share that with you. So you probably watched the news or read a report of somebody who's been in prison 30 years, and then they get released because the evidence comes out that was suppressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an innocence project is a nonprofit group that does that. A conviction integrity unit usually works hand in hand with the prosecutor to look at cases and overturn them where the evidence was faulty or there was something improper. Every person in the United States is represented by an innocence project or a conviction integrity unit, except the United States military. We are not. Go back to that 40% getting sent without probable cause. Again, if you're a civilian, they cannot submit your case for without probable cause. But in the military, they can. In the military, they can. And what I always tell people, I never tell anybody not to join the military, because we love the military, right? Mm-hmm. We just want them to do the right thing, is ask these questions. Look, what are you doing for the falsely accused and wrongly convicted? How easy is it to get sharped, right? And do you know someone who's been falsely accused? Is ask those questions, and then not only listen for the answer, look to see what they don't say, right? Look at how they act. And then you make that decision based on your personal feeling and your circumstances. It's the metaphor. The idea I use is, what if I told you the military had burn pits, right? And initially they didn't want to do anything to this burn pit. So would you be okay if they said, hey, look, we're not going to do burn pits anymore, but we're not going to take care of these people who were negatively impacted? Or let's say Agent Orange. Hey, these people, they had Agent Orange. We're not going to use Agent Orange again, but we don't want to take care of these people who did it, who had it done before. That's what we're trying to fight against, is stop the behavior, right? Be fair and just. And let me also say we support true victims, Daniel. The difference between us and a lot of those rights groups is we believe in and they believe in or. We believe in true victims and a fair and just process. And they believe you're either for the accuser or you're for the accused. And we believe in and they believe in or.
Wow. Any are there any are there any organizations that you want to enlighten people to if they are falsely accused, or is there a policy that they can pinpoint if they're falsely accused?
So one organization that I work with a lot is called Save Our Heroes. So they can Google Save Our Heroes. I work hand in hand with that group. You can contact me and I'll leave my contact information out. You have the Defense Advisory Committee for the Investigations, Prosecutions, and Defense of Sexual Assault. If you contact me, I'll teach you, how to get in touch with them and speak in front of them and share your case history with them. And they have direct access to both Congress and the Secretary of Defense. And so those are probably the best resources I have for that. I can coach people on how to get a good attorney because you've never hired an attorney before. You're stressed. You don't know what to do. I'll give them questions to ask. I will give them alternatives if they can't hire their own attorney. As an example, I go consider a private investigator, right? Consider a paralegal to assist your military appointed defense counsel, which is less expensive than an attorney. That's if you can't afford an attorney. I 100% believe in having a good attorney. But for some people who don't have that money, I go, here's some things you can do that don't involve as much money as a civilian attorney. And then also questions to ask your defense attorney, right? So a lot of people, again, they just don't know what they don't know. And then how to think about the evidence, how to think about protecting yourself and things like that. I testified in my own defense as an example. That's not for everybody, but I stood in front of the jury and said, look, I didn't do this. Now, most people don't understand why 100% of people accused don't speak in front of the jury. Well, it's because the lawyers tell you not to. They said because the burden of proof is on the prosecution. In the military, it's a different story. They get all the evidence first, and then they decide what you can do, and then the judge decides what you can go forward with.
Wow.
Another Army case that's very recent. This young man gets falsely accused by his ex-wife because he leaves her, goes with someone else. So he feels so much pressure. He can go to prison for 30 years. So he takes a plea deal because he can get 3 instead of 30. And he's like, look, I know what they can do to convict me regardless of what the evidence shows. His ex-wife gets so upset, she wrote a letter admitting, hey, look, I lied and made it up. I was mad at you. We have a copy of the letter. We submitted it to the military to say, okay, they still can't punish her for what she did. And that young man is still in prison. So we bring attention to it. And we go, before you let let me back up. What if I told you your daughter will be believed, but your son will not, regardless of what the evidence is? We're saying allow the evidence. And then I'm going to use some stuff that's in the news. I don't know if you're following kind of the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, let's pretend. Well, let's not even pretend because that happened. Is it an allegation was made? So Justin Baldoni was punished before the court ever saw any evidence.
Yep.
He was dropped by his agent, or marketing company or something like that, and he lost out on at least 3 opportunities. Was there any penalty to his accuser? No. And then he started publicly putting video and text messages out. And then now public opinion is like, wait a minute. What you said here doesn't match what we're seeing here. But he's still fighting for his career. He's fighting for his life. there was a gag order. This side asked to stop him from going public with all the evidence. And fortunately, the judge said no. And it's because public opinion believes that 2%. Yeah. They believe that 2%. And we're like, believe the evidence. Mm-hmm. And so he's putting that evidence out because, and the sad part, Daniel, is his career will be destroyed regardless. Of if he
he's done. Yeah. He's done.
And that's what happens in the military. It's, I'll tell you another Army case. I call it the horny candy bar lady.
Oh, Lord.
Louisiana, I think it used to be called, what's Fort Polk called now?
Oh, yeah, they changed the name. It ain't Fort Polk no more.
They changed the name. Mm-hmm. So anyway, here's the situation. A lady goes out. She's married with 4 kids. She tells her husband she's going to go get a candy bar. Instead, she goes to a bar. This young man, he's out with his Army friends. They're drinking. She dances with him, dirty dancing, kissing on him, tonguing him down. His friends are oohing and eyeing. You know how they do it.
Yeah.
She asked him in front of the friend. She's doing shots. Hey, can we go back to your barracks room and have a little fun? He's like, yeah. His friends oohing and eyeing. She's driving. He jumps in the ride, goes back to the base. They have relations. Here's the challenge. Remember I said she's supposed to be getting a candy bar. She got a little bit more than a candy bar. Mm-hmm. She got 4 kids. Now she got to go back home.
Oof.
Well, guess what? They had unprotected sex. So she goes to a hospital to get a morning after. Mm-hmm. And they ask her, were you raped? Because I believe their policy is, hey, you can't get this unless you're raped. You're coming to a hospital. Mm-hmm. You can't get this unless you're a victim of rape. They ask her 4, 5, 6 times. She looks down, finally says yes. But she doesn't want to press charges against the person. So she can get the pill. Remember, she got to go home to her husband because she's supposed to get a candy bar. The police get her phone, track it down to the bar, look at the camera, and arrest the young man. He spent his entire 20s in Leavenworth.
Oh,
he got 20 in prison.
Making big rocks in the little rocks.
Big rocks in the little rocks. And you're like, wait a minute. She did this. She did that. There were witnesses. His squad mates are there. And I'm going to give you another Army we had that fortunately worked out. A young man was in a training, and a young lady, Army, comes up to him and asks him to help her with pull-ups. I'm sorry. So how do you help somebody with pull-ups?
I usually have them bend their knees, and I usually pull them up from their ankles personally.
That's a great strategy.
I don't play these games.
I think he boosted her from the back a little bit.
Oh, Lord have mercy. That's a rookie move.
well, so she's like, pardon me, sexual assault. Mm-hmm. I think he asked her, though, how you want me to do this, right? So he didn't just, she goes, yeah, go ahead. And then now it's sexual assault. So all of the people there testified for him, but they still did an investigation that took 2 weeks. Mm. And even though they determined that he was not at fault, he got rolled back 2 weeks to the next class. So think about it. He wasn't prosecuted. He still was accused. It still took 2 weeks. And even with all those witnesses there, that guy's heart rate is out of control. He's got cortisol. And he doesn't trust anybody now. That's the type of pressure that was on the system. And we hope with the new administration that things will change. We're very hopeful.
Yeah. Wow. Arvis, this has been an incredible interview. We would love to have you back to give us some more information if it fits in your schedule. Do you have any closing words that you wanted to make towards the audience?
So, yes, a last request, please go to change.org/unjust UCMJ, sign the petition, share the petition, share it with your friends, your loved ones. If you have any questions at all, I'm an open book. Come ask me. You want to see evidence? We'll show you that as well. And the sad part is you have to protect yourself. We didn't get into sexual harassment, but in the military, if you go to court-martial for sexual harassment, the penalty is 2 years in prison and a dishonorable discharge. Mm. If Daniel and I were in a closed office and we were telling each other dirty jokes and someone on the other side heard it, even if they weren't in a room, they could call sexual harassment. If someone's looking at someone for too long, they could say sexual harassment. And only in the military does that exist. That's the type of pressure that they're under. So please ask for help, reach out, and we will help you in any way we can. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being a true warrior and patriot for putting this information out.